the Obama administration was focused on paying for sex changes for people, and we were distracted from the actual war-fighting capability.
Some of the bloated staff that surrounds some of these four stars, it's like the socialist utopia.
There's a lot of really almost vicious, vitriolic opposition from the Democrats on the Armed Services Committee who lost. He's in there.
Today in Virginia, we saw one of the most remarkable speeches given by a Secretary of War and a president. Pete Hegseth did not hold back. Let's play the clip.
This administration has done a great deal from day one to remove the social justice, politically correct, and toxic ideological garbage that had infected our department, to rip out the politics. No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that.
He slammed fat generals. He declared the era of unprofessional appearances over. No more beardos. And he told dissenting officers, if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you can do the honourable thing and resign. President Trump followed up with, if you don't like it, somebody, I'm going to fire them right on the spot. Now, joining to break all that down is Iraq War veteran, political advisor Christopher Niewee. Sorry, I've probably got the name wrong there. And and Washington Examiner's Tom Rogan is still with us. Gentlemen, Christopher, I'm going to come to you first. As a proud beardo, what was going on today?
Well, I've known Pete Hegseth for years.
Yeah.
Like him, I served in a war, and I'm also the proud grandson of an Iwo Jima Marine veteran, my grandfather, who served in World War II. And we need to have a tough military that meets physical standards, and that's what they're after. They're after making sure troops can meet physical standards, so that when they're in a life or death situation, we're not losing people's lives because of social justice.
Not exactly controversial to say that generals perhaps should be able to pass a bleep test once a quarter or so. The big song and dance, the drama of summoning the generals for the first time in decades to essentially call them woke and fat. Is that helpful? Is that conducive to a happy ship?
Well, if you want to have change, you have to be a little bit of a disciplinarian at times. I mean, you see that with a parent and a child. The military needs to serve its function. I think for many years, many would feel as though the Obama administration was focused on paying for sex changes for people, and we were distracted from the actual war-fighting capability. And as someone who served in Iraq, many of the women do a great job. However, some of the women struggle with the M249 guns, had to be relieved in Iraq. Had we been ambushed, I probably would have been killed because of that social justice BS that the Secretary was talking about. So I'm proud of my friend. I think he's doing a great job, and we need to have a military that can fight to win, and stop letting these liberal civilians or Senator Sheldon Whitehouse making comments about how the Department of War runs. That's his job, and he's doing it.
I saw some of the commentaries today remarkably inadvertently sexist and racist in the fact that Pete Hegseth said he's going to hire on merit Tom Rogan, and everyone said, well, you're clearing out all the black generals and all the females. I was like, well, no. If you're saying you're hiring on merit, you're saying that there's not a single black general that doesn't deserve to be there?
No,
he's got a point, right?
And I think that point of merit, exigent merit, is the key. And frankly, I disagree with Pete Hegseth's decision to relieve the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, C.Q. Brown, who was a Air Force essentially Top Gun level instructor. I think had some silly comments, but actually very well respected, as is the case with Dan Kane. I think to Christopher's point, broadly, actually, my grandfather was 6th Marine Division Okinawa, right, and he's still around, which is very fortunate for you. So do you want lethality?
Same division,
yes.
5th Marines. Same division.
Oh, so he was 6th.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, we'll talk about that after. But to Christopher's point, right? No one's really complaining about female fighter pilots or some of the intelligence roles. You want people to be in a position that they can do the mission effectively. Yeah. I think the comments were well made about fat generals and admirals, and as Christopher would know better than me, some of the bloated staff that surrounds some of these four stars. It's like the socialist utopia. I mean, it's almost Soviet style. Where I think Pete Hegseth was, the tone I think could have been better was there was a performance element to this. Walking around the stage, oscillating in tone. Some of the profanity.
How's he rated? In Pentagon people I've spoken to have suggested that he's not actually in the Pentagon that much. He's at the White House most of the time, just signing executive orders and posing pictures with the president. I
think the media consensus is, that he's poorly regarded. I actually think when you talk to people, that it's not as clear cut as that. I think there is clearly he is not traditional defense secretary in the vein of some of the predecessors, but you have to retain the president's trust, which perhaps wasn't the case in the first term. And he seems to have a good relationship with Dan Kane. So, yeah.
Look, there's a bit of snobbishness about this. He's a Fox News host, but he's a former veteran, right? He's in charge of a 3 million strong organisation. But do you think he's been unfairly sort of briefed against and tarnished?
Well, it's one of these figures that has high positives, high negatives. I mean, we saw that in the confirmation hearings, which I got up early enough to get into. And, there's a lot of really almost vicious, vitriolic opposition from the Democrats on the Armed Services Committee who lost. He's in there. And the bottom line is he's doing the job. He's served in combat. I heard someone make the comment that I'm sure these generals enjoy getting a lecture from Secretary of Defense Hegseth. You mean like all the lectures I got when I was a sergeant and I had to listen to all these generals talk about all these things, and then all the times we're going home and then none of it was true. We were there for 6 more months, 9 more months. I mean, generals do a lot of blabbering as well. We also have a term called Pentagon desk colonels. So like Pete, I was actually out there in a hostile fire area, so maybe we have some credibility and someone should listen to us once in a while.
There was one thing I want to pick your brains on that the Secretary said, the Secretary of War, as we should call him, chiseling away, still chiseling away at bits of the Pentagon. But anyway, I wonder if they put them in a cupboard or they're going to bring them back, the defence signs. Or I think they should burn them, right? This is done. Anyway, we're going down a rabbit hole. The Secretary said we're not in an era of peacetime anymore. That doesn't really chime with the sort of campaign rhetoric of Donald Trump, who said we were going to step back from, America was going to step back from being the world's policeman. The era of forever wars is over. What do you think he meant by that?
I think it's a little bit of strategic messaging in terms of, we know our opponent is Russia and China. We have the defense security document, but also I think they just want to set a tempo of preparedness. And, we are at an era where there are conflicts, geopolitical conflicts, and part of the nuclear strategy, preventing nuclear weapons, is to prevent nuclear war. So again, it's strategy, but it is the war business. And so, I think we should be less worried about the terminology and looking at our preparedness for some of these scenarios. And physical fitness is the #1 basic aspect of that. And so that's what they're turning to do. And they've gotten a lot done so far in the last few months in terms of defense personnel policy.
Tom, we saw the president, campaign on one platform, but then, bomb very strategically but very effectively Iran. Do you think we're going to see a little bit more of this? The era of peacetime is going to start to be sort of flexible.
I mean, he is inherently unpredictable in that.
Bombing Venezuelan. Well,
exactly.
And there was talk about bombing Venezuela on the ground in the coming weeks. It's America first doesn't necessarily mean America out off the pitch.
No, and it's you see the change in tone on Russia. He mentioned in the speech today about deploying ballistic missile submarines to counter the Russians, based on Dmitry Medvedev's threats on social media. But Venezuela, people, note obviously the attacks on the boats. There's a Marine Expeditionary Unit there, 2,200 Marines. There's an Arranger Advanced Force, I understand. There are special forces there. There are aircraft coming in. There's a lot of stuff there that you don't need to hit boats, but would be pretty useful to seize an airfield or to do some pretty credible projections inside Venezuela. So watch this space, I think, is a good phrase.
All right, Tom, stay there. Christopher, thank you very much for joining us. Just final thought, how would you have felt if you were still in uniform, sitting there being lectured like that? You'd be all right with it?
I think I'd be okay with it.
You're a tough guy.
I would just be trying to stay awake because you get up so early in the Army.
Even the beardos? Are you a proud beardo?
I'm a beardo now as a veteran. But I don't know about when I was in uniform. But thanks for having me, Harry.
I don't know.